Hello, everyone, and good whatever wonderful moment of this day you are enjoying on your time zones as you tune in from across the world. And welcome to yet another August conversation. Today, our Hacking HR space will be filled with conversations about strategic workforce planning. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour. We have Jessa, as usual, working her magic backstage. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers that are super eager to come up on the screen. So Jessa, if you can bring them up, please. And as they settle on their boxes, I will just welcome everybody in the audience once again, and a quick ask for help. If you can just drop a few comments, maybe just let us know where you're connecting from. And in this way, first, you help us know that we're live and everything is up and running. And also, you will help us travel vicariously around the world. Now, today, we will be talking about strategic workforce planning, a label that what I hear from my colleagues within the HR fills people with equal dose of joy and dread. So we will be talking about what it is, what it isn't, what people expect from it, what people misuse it for, and also, as Enrique designed the title of the panel, anticipating and addressing future talent needs for organizational success. Otherwise, no pressure. So we will make the most out of our time here today. I see Howdy from Texas. Thank you so very much, Jed. So apparently we are up and running and live in this great world of the internet. Now, what we will do, we will start with a short round of introductions. I will pass the e-mic around clockwise as you appear on my screen. And I will ask you to first shortly introduce yourselves. And also, without going into a lot of details, we will do this right after this round. What is a very short, very user-friendly definition of strategic workforce planning that you bring into our conversation today? Frederica, it's so great to see you. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I see we have people from around the world. Good to be here today. So my name is Frederica Butler, and I am an HR business leader with Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and I am coming to you from Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I think how I would describe as strategic workforce planning is having the right people in the right seats within budget. So understanding the skills that you need at the right time is so critical and important. So that would be my selling point to my business leaders.
Thank you so very much. Anna, it's good to see you. Welcome in this conversation.
Good morning, Mainola. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice being here with you. It's early morning in California. I'm coming to you from the Silicon Valley. And my name is Anna. My last name is Mama Lucky, and it seems that my mama has been lucky. I do work with organizational design and effectiveness for organizations that they want really to improve the way that they operate. My background is HR and organizational development and design.
Thank you so very much. A very, very short definition for strategic workforce planning. What would that be from you?
I believe that you really need to plan for what you want to have as a company, what kind of capabilities you want to have. And that is workforce, strategic workforce planning.
Thank you. Carol, good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you too, Mainola. And hello, everyone, wherever you're joining us from. I'm joining you from Denver, Colorado. Again, my name is Carol Cooley, and I'm a Chief People Officer. I've primarily worked in highly regulated industries, so financial services and healthcare and insurance. When I think about strategic workforce planning, really, I think at its core is kind of similar to what Anna said, but I'll take it just a slightly different twist on it. I think it is being proactive about understanding and addressing your talent needs versus having a more traditional reactive approach.
Thank you. Jamie, good to see you. Good to have you in this conversation today.
Good morning, good afternoon. Glad to be here. My name is Jamie Conrad. I'm the current VP of People and HR at Trust Radius, a B2B SaaS organization headquartered here in Austin, Texas. So hello to my Austin peeps. For me, the user-friendly way to think about strategic workforce planning is forecasting future staffing needs and talent needs for the business based off of the business needs, and then figuring out strategically how to fill in any gaps from skills assessments.
Thank you. Well, who else to make the panel complete today? Melissa, good to see you.
Likewise, great to see you and my fellow panelists. My name is Melissa Moore. It's also early for me. I'm based in Oregon. I did see, I think it was Andrea calling in from Oregon this morning. So welcome, everyone. I am a VP of talent and both acquisition and development in a technology company here in Portland, Oregon. And so strategic workforce planning is a core part of what we try to do effectively at my company. And for me, I agree with everything that has been said by the other panelists. For the audience, of course, it's how are you going to meet your business objectives through people? Right. So if your people are helping you achieve, whether it's a product or a service or otherwise in a particular market at a particular time, what are the people that are going to help you get there? And that's going to range from leadership all the way to early career talent. And how do you have the right mix to help optimize all of the different elements of talent for your business? And of course, that's budget. I think it was Frederica said budget. So all of those things really come together to form a great plan that's going to help you achieve your business objectives through people.
Well, if I ever had any doubts that this would be a great conversation from the intro round alone, so many mental post-its with so many topics to touch on. Now, I would just encourage the audience to use the chat generously. So do consider this conversation an open space for you as much as it is for our speakers. Whatever it is that we're discussing, please drop your own thoughts, opinions, even challenging questions. We will try to blend them into our panel conversation as much as we possibly can. And just by dropping your own experiences with strategic workforce planning and the challenges that you have at the moment, or the opportunities that you harness at the moment, is a great way to keep the community growing and learning from each other. Now, I did promise that we will go a bit deeper into what strategic workforce planning is and what it isn't. Let's first focus on what it is. And I would invite all of you, let's take a few minutes and look at what does a strategic workforce planning look like? What information goes in it? And what kind of insights it gives to its users? So what is a strategic workforce planning through that lens? And you know, I have no idea why the first question always goes diagonally. Carol, that means you're our pioneer today. And then everyone just jump in and build your own conversation. Carol, please.
Yeah, when I think about strategic workforce planning, I think there's a couple of different elements to it, right? So one, you're thinking about the skills, abilities, and roles that your business needs and organization in order to be continuing successful, not only in the present, but in the future needs for the organization. So again, it's really about identifying some of those skills, capabilities, and roles that you need within the organization. The second layer to that, though, is really at the heart of this conversation, and that's the people. So it's who do you have? What skills and abilities do they carry? And where do we need to, I heard someone say, fill in the gaps. Where do we need to fill in the gaps or build additional capabilities in the organization? How do you plug the existing team members that we have into those slots to be ready for future opportunities? And that's, I think, Manola, to your question, that's where the insights come from. When you layer up, here's objectively what we think we need in order to accomplish our goals, and here are the current resources that we have to be able to meet that. The insights it gives you is where you can continue to plug in and upskill people, where you may have those gaps, and then start to think about how you need to address them.
Thank you, Carol. Jamie.
Yeah, and I think that in doing that, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. But where I tend to start is once you've got your business need figured out and the vision is there from executive leadership, I always start with operational efficiencies first. What can we accomplish through technology? How can we, gain some operational efficiencies before we start looking at skills and abilities and throwing people at a problem when maybe we don't need to. So I think there's opportunity to lean into your HR tech stack or technology across the organization before you start getting into the people aspect and the skills aspect of your workforce.
I just add to that, so really great comments, and I agree with everything that's been said. As you kind of get to that next click down and you dig into the data of understanding what is your workforce now, where do you need to go in the future, you're going to layer on some different elements to that. So for example, market dynamics. So how constrained is the talent pool in your area, right? Is there a scarcity of the skill set you need? So does that inform your location strategy? Where are your offices going to be across the company? Are you virtual? Are you in-house? Where does your talent need to be? So there are, you're going to ask yourself, you got this list of questions about whether it's market dynamics, whether it's skills scarcity. Do I need to make, meaning train from within, or do I need to buy? And you could buy in different ways, right? You can recruit, or you can think about M&A strategy. And so your business dynamics in terms of, the budget that you have, how your company is investing, how fast you need to get to market with your product is going to help determine, those different elements of your talent strategy. And grow from within, that's amazing. Are you promoting from within and developing your leadership bench and succession planning, and all of those different elements of your organizational design are going to help inform, right, where you're going to go and when. So I think it's the right time. How fast do you need to get there, which is really going to determine the different activities that you have for your talent pool.
I would like very much to build on what has already been said. It's so important to understand how your business really makes the money. And when you know how your business really makes the money, you really need to focus strategically on that. And you really need to know what are the capabilities that you need in order to make that money. And for me, this means skills-based workforce planning, which means that I really need to have the skills in place in order to make that happen. And I believe that nowadays, strategic workforce planning is not really planning for roles or planning for headcount or for people, but planning for the skills. Make sure that you have a strategic talent framework in place that will allow you to make decisions on the channel that you're going to use. And yes, it might be just to automate things so that you don't need people to do things. But you really need to decide, are you going to buy talent, hire from the outside, that means, or you're going to build talent, succession planning, people development, or perhaps borrow talent, which means really use contractors that would be once off. So you really need to know which of these three B's is buy, build, or borrow. So that's why I believe that strategic workforce planning really happens when you do it a little bit more skills-based than in the past.
Yeah, I definitely, just to piggyback onto what Anna talked about. Yeah, the talent management process is very critical to understand where people are, what are the gaps in the talent that you have. And I don't think we spend enough time on that. And so, those of us in HR, that's something that we continue to stress and try to work with our leaders on looking at the talent that we have and not waiting until it's too late. I think someone mentioned this being a proactive exercise, and it's something that you're looking at least on an annual basis to make sure that you're on track, because we can look at the landscape that's ever changing and the needs of the business changes more frequently. I would say, if we look back a decade ago, things change very, very quickly, and we have to be able to pivot. We have to be agile and be able to respond to the changes in the business landscape. But that talent management process has to be really, really tight, looking at your talent, making sure that it is a routine process and exercise that you're doing on a regular basis to understand the people that we have. What are the skills? What are the capabilities? And then, of course, you can plan for those gaps as well.
Before we move forward, I just want to acknowledge that I've been reading the comments and I picked up on some insights around the elements that go into the strategic workforce planning, some of the challenges. So we will absolutely pick those up in just a few minutes. But before we get to that, I am very curious about the misexpectations that some stakeholders within organizations have from a strategic workforce planning. Can you give a few examples in which people expect things from a strategic workforce planning that are not to get answers from a strategic workforce planning? How is this used and abused and misunderstood? And Jamie, I absolutely loved your comment before we start throwing people at a problem. And I just want to tell you that I will probably pay you royalties in ice cream when we meet, because I will steal it with pride. Can you lead us into this slice of the conversation? How is the strategic workforce planning used and abused in organizations?
Yeah, I think too often, a manager hears that this is the expectation for a business need, and they feel the responsibility. Well, how am I going to execute on that vision? How am I going to be able to accomplish that vision? And they look at their team and they may or may not have the skill set that's needed in their team. And their team's already strapped. They're already working as much as they can. They don't have any more capacity. So what's the first thing that they're going to say? We need to hire more people in order to be able to accomplish that. And that's not always the case, right? There are a lot of opportunities around strategic workforce planning that can be looked at. There could be, other people in other parts of the organization that have the skills that are needed to accomplish those goals. So if you have a well-defined or an agile strategic workforce planning strategy, it could include pulling from all places in the organization. Larger organizations may have some pros and cons to that. Smaller organizations have pros and cons to that, but I don't think it should be overlooked. It should be part of the conversation. And then, like I said, technology. There are so many ways right now. HR tech is still being invested in very heavily by VC companies. We're still at the forefront of Gen AI. And how that is impacting efficiencies in the organization. And so, throwing people at the problem usually results in a bloat, and you see more layoffs and reductions in force happening as a result of making some of those immediate decisions without really thinking through what are all your opportunities for investing in the outcome that you're looking for, not just the hiring of more talent or the need for more people.
I see a lot of enthusiastic nodding across the screen, so I'm sure people are looking for the unmute button. Melissa.
Yeah, I would add that part of the challenge with strategic workforce planning is you think, oh, I built this beautiful plan. I'm going to put it on the shelf for a little bit, and then I'm going to revisit it in 6 months. So what I would encourage people to think, and how this gets maybe misused, is assuming that it's like it's something you look at once a year. And I would encourage people to take a different approach, that consider it to be something very dynamic, and maybe you're visiting it every quarter with your team to, are we on the right path? Did we meet our objectives from the prior quarter? How are we tracking? Particularly right now, the market is very volatile, as Jamie was touching on. And so what I see is, certainly in the tech space, is that companies are also adjusting course. And so we want to the extent possible, be ahead of that, right? Rather than reactive, we want to try to anticipate, where is the business going? What's going to be happening with the market? We can't tell the future, but to the extent that we can anticipate needs and how our business might change, consider your strategic workforce plan dynamic. And then you can break it down into what are the short-term elements of the plan? What are we executing now? And what are the long-term directional things? Where do we need to go? But really consider it in two frames, short-term and long-term, and consider it a dynamic plan that you're revisiting on a regular basis with your leadership.
Yeah, to add to what Jamie and Melissa talked about, what came to mind for me is that a strategic workforce plan is not the same thing as a succession plan. And, really at its core, and it got me thinking about the business dynamics that Melissa keeps talking about. And, I was in the banking industry 18 months ago when there was a big banking crisis, and we had a pretty robust succession plan in place for our organization. But what we ended up needing to do was pair off some of the businesses and lines of loans that we were in. And so while we had a succession plan that included a number of leaders leading those lines of business, ultimately as an organization, we decided to exit those business lines. And so to be nimble and understanding enough that just because we identified someone as a potential successor in another line of business didn't mean that they needed to exit the organization when we exited that business. It also didn't mean the opposite of that we needed to find a place for that person in the ongoing organization just because they were identified on the succession plan. So I think it's really being critical of understanding, and to Melissa's point, being very dynamic about readjusting based on those business conditions and changes.
I see Frederica and Anna, you compete for the hot seat of going last. Should we go Frederica and Anna for this round? Frederica, please.
Okay, sure. One of the other things that I constantly get is that, this is an exercise owned by HR. And so it's an HR thing. So it's, we'll look at it whenever we get to it. And so that's something that I've certainly faced in my career, but it should be owned by the business, co-ownership. And so I typically will look for the business excellence team or someone in operational excellence to be sort of a champion, because as you're building it, everything that everyone else has already mentioned, those leaders from those functions typically can help carry the strategy through. But I do think that that's something that we get pretty often, at least in HR, is that it's an HR thing. And but we have to work with the business and partner with them because it is a business strategy.
And thank you for saying that. Whoever really has the responsibility of completing a strategic workforce planning really needs to ask good questions. And that is something that we really need to build within the HR function. Asking the right questions allows you to take good answers. And what is really required in order to do the strategic workforce planning is to understand very well what really matters, very well what can really take you ahead in the future. And you really understand also the financial and also social environment that you operate with. That means that the HR person or whoever really takes care of the strategic workforce planning really needs to understand the business and the business leaders. A lot of times this does not happen. A lot of times we really take things that business leaders might say for granted. Being on the questioning side, even questioning yourself sometimes, makes you much more systematic in the way of your thinking, makes you a facilitator of what is going on. And that's how you become strategic.
Yeah, I just want to take that and get into the weeds with that just a little bit, because I love that perspective. But that also talks to data integrity, and making sure when you're asking those questions that you're capturing the data, and you're capturing it in a way that allows you to pull accurate reporting. I worked with an organization at one point that had a location that they were just adamant they were sure they needed to hire another person. And when we looked at the data, they were capturing only partial data, and the data that they were capturing wasn't completely accurate. And so they were formulating their assumptions of needing more people based off of inaccurate information and incomplete information. And so, that again speaks to that integrity of the question asking, understanding the business and what needs to be put into your formulas for workforce planning, how you approach that strategically.
I love how all of you are building up towards the wrap-up mic drop moments. From these 2 rounds alone, there are many quotes that I'm sure people will use after this panel from each and every one of you. Now, keeping myself honest to going back and picking up on some things that popped up in the comments, what are some of the moving pieces that you need to pay attention to when building a strategic workforce planning? Because I saw in the comments the need to adapt rapidly to evolving technological landscape, but also the imperative to maintain workforce stability and employee engagement. I saw ethical implications of automation, socioeconomic disparities in upskilling opportunities. And just from what you shared so far, there are many other elements that impact all the decisions that you make while building the strategic workforce planning. And I was thinking, can we take a few minutes and just give this a go? What are the things that you keep in mind as you build it? And I will leave this question on the table, and let's see where inspiration strikes, and we take it from there.
I'll take it.
Jamie.
The employee experience and the human experience in everything that you do can't be overlooked. And so that, includes everything from weaving your DEI strategy into your workforce planning, That includes how we're presenting opportunities across the board. Are you publishing what some of those future workforce needs are? Are you if you've got that anticipated and you've got a forecast, are you giving your employees, all employees, the opportunity to build the skills that would be necessary to be qualified for those roles? Do you have that as part of your professional development opportunities internally? And if not, how is that impacting your employee experience? Also, moving target is your turnover and retention efforts. If you are consistently having high turnover, it makes it even more challenging to make sure you're hitting your workforce planning goals on a regular basis. If you're always strapped for finding new talent because you're not retaining the people that you have internally, whether that's because of your lack of succession planning or investment in professional development opportunities, and then also Melissa mentioned it a little bit earlier about is it remote, is it hybrid, is it in office? There's the global opportunities. What are those locations? How does that come across to help meet the business needs? Does one support more than another? So these are like so much of HR and strategic HR is just having that bigger picture that all of these things impact your people. All the decisions that you make have an impact on the people that are working in your organization. And so how do you make sure that you're weaving appropriately and responsibly all of these strategic responsibilities into whatever decision you're driving for, however you're planning to help to assist the business to meet those business goals?
Thank you, Jamie.
So what Jamie said sometimes can be overwhelming for people teams. And so the thing to think about is how do you break it down into each of those components and use the breadth of your people function and your people team to help achieve different elements of that plan. So if you have a business partner team, you're going to engage your business partners in understanding whether it's engagement, what's happening within the organization, of course, talent acquisition, talent development, your analytics, your rewards team. Every function within HR should help assist in building out this plan and working to achieve the different components of the plan. So if we're going to dig in a little bit to some of the data that Jamie had been talking about, a huge part of that is going to be labor cost, right? So if you have a high labor cost, are you looking at different markets to help balance, right, where you're going to find talent? Your attrition rates, if you have high attrition, where is that attrition? Is it in your mid-level? Is it in your senior level? Is it early career? And that's then going to inform, okay, should I build an intern program where we train and bring people on so that they can grow within the organization? So you have to look at the different, what's happening in your organization on an ongoing basis. If there is high turnover, how do you address that turnover first, so that you can then continue to build in a thoughtful way without putting too much stress on the organization in order to maintain that engagement that you need to have people invested and focused on the task at hand, which is, building the product or providing the service. So all of that to say, involve everybody in the people organization as well as the business in achieving the different elements, and really get your hands on all of the different factors and the data that you're going to be using, because there's going to be trade-offs, right? So where do I need to make a trade-off now in order to achieve a particular goal, in order to help drive business success, and be aware of those trade-offs, and what are the different levers that I need to pull this quarter or next quarter or in the future to be able to help the business achieve the goals.
Yeah, I was curious whether we were settling in a pattern, but I see we go Jamie, Melissa, Carol, and then it's Frederica and Anna. Carol, please.
Yeah, I think something that both Jamie and Melissa hit on, that can't be underestimated is the degree of communication and change management that needs to come along with a rapidly evolving strategic workforce plan. So, I think just because you say, here are the future skills that we need, and even if you um, build really good development plans against those skills or talent needs for the future, you have to think about what is the workforce why. Is the workforce really engaged? Do they have a good understanding of what that vision is and what their role is in achieving those objectives and a part of that vision? So kind of without that engagement, and you're going to miss clear opportunities to bring people along with you and get them engaged in the organization. And that's going to lead to potentially some challenges with turnover and retention that are going to directly impact your strategic workforce plan. So again, think about what your communication strategies are. How are you communicating your vision and values to the organization? How do you make people feel a part of the future of the organization? And again, I think those challenges associated with doing that effectively can't be underestimated.
Anna.
Let me get back to what I said before, because it really builds on what has been exchanged right now. It's so much important to have a skills-based approach, which means that you plan for the skills and not for the headcount, not for the number of people that you're going to have. But this requires that you have a very good idea of what is your current inventory of skills, which means that you really need to be in the position to know who knows what well. And that means that we really need to do a lot of exercise beforehand, before we start really putting over there the strategic workforce planning. Because one thing is to know what you really need, and the other thing is to know what you already have. And a lot of times this does not happen. We make, for many reasons, one of them might be that we make assumptions without assessing the situation. So I believe that assessing the current skills is so much important. Also, it has already been said by both Jamie, Melissa, as well as Carol, that it's so much important at the same time to have in place developmental programs that you really give the opportunity to the people to get the skills that you will need as a company, as an organization. So with that being said, I believe that having in mind always that you really need skills, that can really help the person that does the strategic workforce planning to plan for skills and not for people or headcount, because that creates the flexibility, the agility that the today organization needs in order to quickly respond to the needs that are coming up.
The last thing I will add is that, and some of you kind of touched on this in different ways, but the importance of being inclusive when you're looking at your people inclusive, how you communicate at the different levels, factoring in where people are, the roles that they're in, early career, senior leadership. There is a different change management and communication strategy that goes with that. I'm also making sure that you have different stakeholders at the table to develop the strategy, to maintain the strategy. Again, it's not an HR own, it's co-owned, but you definitely need the various stakeholders within the organization. So I would end this by saying that it's very, very important that we continue to be inclusive as we deploy the strategy and we maintain it.
Thank you all. Now we are quite a few minutes into the second half of our time today. And just taking a few seconds to welcome everybody who joined a little bit later. And for those of you who joined a bit late and those of you who need to jump off before we wrap up, no worries. This is being recorded. You can always go back and enjoy the bits that you missed and re-enjoy the bits that you liked from the same link on our LinkedIn space. Now, those of you who know me for a while, I'm a journalist by trade. I'm a change practitioner by choice. So I love change. And I would like to change the pattern of our panelists today. So, Frederica, you will have the mic to go first, because I would love for you to go deeper on things that you already scratched on twice, if I counted correctly, but math is not my superpower. And I also see some energy around this in the comments. Sadly, I only see LinkedIn user. I don't see a name, but thank you for the comment. Just saying that there is a wider piece of work with working with other specialty departments, finance teams, L&D, HR analytics. So Frederica, lead us into a part of this conversation where we look at, who's who in the zoo, who does what for the strategic workforce planning, and extra points are available for any stakeholder that is not necessarily within the usual circle of suspects. So otherwise, no pressure, Frederica, please.
Oh, no, that's fine. I would say my must-haves at the table would be your business strategy, business excellence, operational excellence, someone who is in that role. I think they bring to the table, they know the overall business strategy. And so you definitely need that to understand where we're going so that we can map that out in the strategy. So that would be one. Absolutely, finance. Whoever your finance partner is critical. You definitely need that analytical person there. So if you have someone in HR that, they're a SME, or maybe, we're fortunate to where we have a pretty good HR analytics team. So I would have someone from that group as well. And then your TA or your talent management partner as well. And then depending on the client group. So I've supported commercial and clinical operations. So it would typically be your operations head or your tech ops head. But I do believe in a small team to start, because as we know, the more cooks in the kitchen, how that goes. So I think that if you have those specific SMEs at the table, along with the HR business partner, you can certainly get things started and moving in the right direction. But I do believe in having that core team there. And I think some of the questions that Anna talked about, making sure that we're touching on all the important elements of having that strategy. But that would be my dream team.
Thank you.
I would like really to chime in and say that nowadays that I believe that one path that we can take within strategic workforce planning is not to have workforce, but also automate. I would like the Chief Technology Officer and the Technology Department to be very much present in the kind of thinking that I will have. So I do believe in, I believe that technology is really the cornerstone of business. And with that being said, I really would like to have these people really to help me see how I can build capabilities within the organization without having the need really to buy talent. And that means that I will have that early, of course, in my discussions, early in shaping up the conclusions before I start doing the strategic workforce planning.
Thank you. And just a spoiler alert, I see a wonderful question in the comments from Chad. So welcome, Chad, to co-facilitating the session and making my life easier. Thank you. But let's finish this roundup. Who's doing the work for the strategic workforce planning? And then we will come back to Chad's question. Carol, I see you unmuted, and then Jamie.
Yeah, I think we've touched on it here a little, but I think it's also finding those champions within the organization, who may have a different perspective around this. Who's, Anna just mentioned technology officer, who's going to have that kind of different perspective about how we may be able to stack the talent deck. And what's coming down from a business or technology perspective. So while I can't, specifically call out an individual role or a function, I think it's really important to include those folks who have that kind of futuristic thinking, or can bring a technology lens to the conversation, or a champion of strategic workforce planning. And I think those people are critical to bring along with you on that journey.
Yeah, I think anytime you can have employee representation at the table, some larger organizations have ERGs around, business and some of the business visionary aspects. So having representatives from those types of groups or employee engagement committees, culture committees, even can play a part, bring a different lens and a different feel to strategic workforce planning. And then a couple that haven't been mentioned, engaging the board of directors just to make sure that your long-term, that what you're doing is in alignment with the business's long-term vision, their long-term vision of the organization and the business needs. And if you're in a union environment, you're going to obviously want to make sure you're bringing in your union representatives where needed.
I would be remiss if I didn't throw in CEO. So, as you think about, your strategic workforce plan, depending on the size of your organization, they may be really involved. And I think that's a huge benefit because they provide the strategic vision of the company and where you're going. So always to make sure you're aligned with the CEO and, getting her involved in that plan from the very beginning so that that you're set up for success and that you're not just working in a silo. So yeah, I agree with Jamie on the board as well. That's great.
Thank you all. And now back to Chad Miller's question. Someone earlier mentioned buy, build, borrow, the latter being contractors. I'd love to hear panel thoughts on how their organization is using part-time, fractional, or contract talent and how this impacts overall business culture. Now, Anna, it was you who mentioned buy, build, borrow the first time, I believe, straight off the intro rounds. And I know that business culture is also near and dear to your heart. So would you lead us into this round of insights, please?
Sure, thank you very much. Well, it's really the path that you will take can lead you to different directions. That's in life as well. So having that kind of direction, for example, of borrowing and not building, which means short-term contractions or fractional people, and now this is getting a lot of traction lately, means that you really need to base your culture, to base really the engagement of your people, not on the camaraderie that it's being built with everyday exchanges, but something a little bit higher than that. So I would like to remind us all, even if we go somewhere, not that frequently, but we believe in that very strongly, we are going to fight for that. Remember, I mean, you can have in your mind a club that you go, for example. It doesn't have to be a place that you go every day, all day, that it would be something that you would believe in. Organizations really need to have a vision, but most important, a purpose that is very much speaks to the heart of the people that are engaged within that. So that means that organizations need to have an operation that is friendly, not only with the people, but also with a lot of things coming around. For example, believing in the sustainability goals makes really every one of us feel that we work for a corporation that preserves the environment, that really takes care of the future, for the future people of this planet. At the same time, really having an organization that has clarity on what they're trying to achieve and us feel very well connected to that clear message and clear purpose, that it might be a good vision that we envision ourselves. So what I'm saying in one sentence is that the purpose of the organization, the good intentions of organization, and the human approach can really help in order to make people really believe in what that organization wants to achieve. It's not the hours, it's not the location that will make that happen. It's really the purity and the good intentions.
Thank you, Anna. Any thoughts?
Sure, I'll jump in. There's a couple different circumstances. So going back to the question is, when do you use contingent workforce? For me, it is really what's happening in the business that might help you determine whether or not you have a need for contingent workforce. So for example, if there is a skill that you don't have, that's a very unique skill set, you might hire a high skilled contractor or even a third party to do some work. If there is work that is more seasonal or more product kind of timeline based in nature. And what I mean by that, so I worked in the video game industry for a number of years. And as you get ready to launch a product, you need to ramp up your testing team, right? So if you need to have a large group of individuals focused on testing, or it might be lab work in another organization, how are you going to use contingent workforce to flex based on the needs of your company, and when are you going to do that throughout the year? So those are two examples. So when you're trying to augment the workforce in a particular way, it could be based on the skills that you need, or it could be based on your talent demands at a given time. That is going to help determine whether or not you engage those other parties. Or in the kind of final example that I'll use is, if you're entering a new market or a new country, you might decide to use a third party, whether it's an employer of record or another professional organization, to say, okay, I'm going to be entering Europe and we don't have an entity there yet. What are the different companies that I can use to help me establish that as I'm going to build out my talent strategy in a particular market? So those are some examples that I keep in mind when considering contingent workforce.
Thank you, Melissa. Carol.
Yeah, I can build on that a little bit too, with kind of almost a reverse example. And it's probably not as prevalent anymore, but there are still some things out there that require outsourcing. When I was working for an organization that was going through a very large digital transformation effort, we recognized as an organization that we wouldn't be able to ramp up in that space as quickly as we wanted to. So we brought in a strategic partner to handle some of the operations in that. And in that, we outsourced a number of our own employees to that new contractor company that we were working with, and made that transition. So I think that's another approach, that if there are too many barriers to entry in a particular market, you might want to bring on a strategic partner to help you with some of those things, either for a certain period of time to get through that transition, or on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Carol. Frederica, I saw you unmuted earlier for a few seconds.
Yes. So all of the examples that Melissa and Carol discussed is what what I support as a HR business partner. What I don't support is the try before you buy. There are still a lot of industries that do that. And, I don't think we should be hiring contractors or consultants for FTE roles just because you want to try before you buy. I don't agree with that. That's really not a strategy at all, but there are some leaders who like that. I also think that there should be guardrails around this, because it can get out of control, because if it's not an FTE, we don't always have visibility to it. I've worked in organizations where it was very loose and you're like, what? They've been here for 2 years, which we know that's, way too long. And I've worked in organizations where legal was very, very, there were clear guardrails. This is the limit. There's a policy in place. We would get alerts when contractors would get to a certain point in their contract. So I prefer that, where at least I know and I'm not surprised, and I can work with the leader to find out, is the project going over the time? Do we need to request more time to provide the justification? But I do think that it needs to be, there needs to be a policy or some guardrails in place to make sure that you're being consistent when you are looking at consultants and contract labor.
Thank you.
And Chad, to take it back to your question on impacting overall business culture, I think when we lean into, part-time, fractional, contract talent, it indicates to the organization that we want to be flexible, we want to be agile, we want to fill needs when there are needs, but we don't want to be irresponsible in our overall planning. And so you can lean into that that idea of flexibility, agility, and it also allows for you can take that into your culture as an opportunity for continuous innovation. If you've got outsiders that are coming in with fresh eyes, maybe a different skill set, it can indicate to the organization that you're bringing in innovative ideas, or you're allowing for those conversations to happen that may not have a place without doing so. And so I think there's a way to impact your overall business culture in a very positive way, especially if you can tie those aspects into your core values.
Well, sadly, we are frustratingly close to saying goodbye. We're 8 minutes away from wrapping this conversation up, but I do want to use about a handful of the remaining minutes to address a reality of many people in our audience as we keep hearing from them, and that is the reality of an HR function of one. Now, no matter how we look at it, the strategic workforce planning is quite an undertaking. So when we are in the situation of an HR function of one, where would you recommend people to focus so that they can produce the most meaningful value that they can with the resources that they have available? And Melissa, would you give it a first cut?
Sure. So if you're an HR department of one and trying to tackle this, I would recommend that based on the earlier comments we were making about involve your partners. So distribute the work among, so if you're an HR department of one, you're probably in the leadership team as well at some level. So you're going to be working with your finance partners. Somebody mentioned ops. It's possible that you have a data team. You're going to have IT, maybe resources within the systems team for IT that you're going to try to work collaboratively with them and your leadership on achieving the different elements of your strategic workforce plan. And I would say then just take it one step at a time. Be incremental and build over time. So what do you need to achieve now? What is the most critical need of the business that you can help fulfill as an HR leader? And again, that might be recruitment, or it could be training, depending on the market dynamics that you're facing or where you're at as a company. So one step at a time, spread out the work, and then just be super planful about prioritizing what needs to come first.
I would add to what Melissa said, know your organization and know your business cadence too. We've talked about that a lot as well. So what is the organizational readiness? What are those first incremental steps that you can take that the organization is willing to absorb and able to absorb? So if it's starting with a skills-based approach and saying, hey, in the future, we're going to need skill X, and we don't really have a lot of that. What's our next best step forward? And working with your partners to be able to identify what are those next best steps forward? How are you going to influence what's most needed in the organization? And I think that is something that even an HR department of one can start to do once they're really integrated with understanding that business cadence and what the organization is going to need. You're going to have insights, and you can bring your partners along with you about what those best incremental steps may be.
I'll just add on that, definitely understanding where the business is and the maturity, if the company is ready to take on a strategic workforce planning, especially if it's new. I've been in situations where it's new and it's taken a couple of years for the business leaders to buy into it. In those situations, I did leverage some of the business leaders outside of HR to help me build a business case and speak the language that they understand in order for them to then buy into it. And I've had organizations where there's a plan in place. We have all the digital sophisticated technology, and so, which is also great. But I do think it's very important to understand the readiness piece. And sometimes you have to do a piecemeal, like, okay, I'm going to work on this first, and then, it's a step by step. But I think understanding your audience and where the company is very, very important if you want this to be a successful strategy.
I just want really to sum up the work that one person HR department has into 3 words: inspire, automate, strategize. You really need to inspire all parts of the organization to be fractions of the HR. You really need to automate, at an exponential level. And last, you really need to be strategic and not operational. Really get rid of anything operational as much as possible. Find ways.
And speaking as an HR department of one, I would say don't forget to breathe. Take a step every once in a while just to breathe. And then leading into what Melissa said at the very beginning of this conversation, think of yourself more as a quarterback, not the doer. You don't have to play all the positions on the field. You just have to help facilitate that the other positions are the excellence that you need them to be. And take that into all your conversations as you remember your self-care on a regular basis.
You are all wonderful, and you very generously and dangerously so left me with 2 whole minutes for the wrap-up round. And because we touched on skills and we mentioned skills several times, I decided that the wrap-up mic drop punchline round will be around skills. If you could name one skill and one skill only that HR professionals should really pour themselves into in order to up their game when it comes to strategic workforce planning, what would that skill be? And you can say the skill and a short sentence of why. I will give you a few seconds to think about it. We will go counterclockwise from how we started. So we will start with Melissa and work our way up to Frederica. Just thanking everybody in the audience for being here. I would also open this question to everybody in the audience. So drop your skills of choice in the chat. That would be wonderful to follow. Thank you, Jessa, for taking care of us. And Melissa, one skill and one short sentence.
Business acumen. So understanding the business and being able to help plan alongside them.
Thank you. Jamie.
Relationship management. We're all humans and we're leading a human function.
Wonderful. Carol.
Asking good questions to seek to understand.
Thank you. Anna.
System thinking. We really need to understand how each space is affecting the other, the completeness of an organization, the interconnectedness.
Thank you. Frederica.
I would say data analytics, being able to analyze data. And then the other one is resilience. Always change. You've got to be able to pick yourself up and keep going. So
Thank you. Thank you. Frederica, Anna, Carol, Jamie, and Melissa. It was wonderful to have you here. I hope I will get the pleasure to host you again soon. Thank you, everybody in the audience, and stay tuned. We have so many more wonderful conversations coming up, and always a pleasure to spend some time with you all. Thank you. And thank you, Jessa. See you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
day.
Thanks, everybody.
Good evening, everyone.